Let's kick off with British American. That stock continues to fall. It fell 6.8% yesterday, closing at 7 shillings 25 cents. In the 3 sessions that it has traded on the bourse, it's fallen to lows every single session. It listed at 9 shillings. Why the selling pressure for this newly listed stock?
I think the first one is obviously market conditions, and market conditions are not very conducive at this time. It was also undersubscribed, so I think there's always that sort of downward pressure on it when a counter is undersubscribed. But increasingly also, because insurance companies generally tend to invest in the stock market, and stock market conditions haven't been that positive. I think investors do not see a very positive turnaround for the rest of the year. So I think that's why they're lightening their positions.
On the other hand, we have some good news for Kenya and agricultural stocks with expected rains in the upcoming season, and of course, with the drought and the impact that's had on the economy, this is good news. Do we expect some buying into the agricultural stocks on the back of that?
Yeah, certainly, and we've already been seeing some investors positioning in those counters. Obviously, they are quite illiquid, and very few counters which are actually listed. But the tea and coffee companies are generally very well positioned. We're having now increasing production, at least with the current rains, and also with the weaker currency, down about 18% year to date. And global prices have held on reasonably well. So it's a pity that we haven't really taken advantage of that from a production point of view, but revenues are holding up quite well.
As you say, there are quite illiquid stocks, so we see sharp movements in those prices whenever they do trade. But do you hold any of the agricultural stocks?
We've been recommending, so the likes of Kakuzi, Sasini, those are some of our favorite picks, and also from a liquidity standpoint, they're a lot more liquid compared to the rest. Williamson Tea is also another one that we like.
Let's move on to Kenya Airways. That counter bouncing 1.6% yesterday, closing at 30 shillings 75 cents. But overall this year, it's been under a lot of pressure ahead of its upcoming rights issue. We heard yesterday that one of the new E190 jets was delivered to Jomo Kenyatta Airport. Good news as it embarks on its aggressive expansion plans for the region. But still yet to be heard how it intends to raise funds to pay for these new jets. It has said it will be holding an announcement this week and called investors to a meeting. Do we expect any clarity on the upcoming rights issue there?
Yes, certainly. They've invited analysts for a meeting, and it doesn't look like there's anything else that they're going to announce other than the capital raising structure, and also explaining their story in terms of maybe over the next few years what strategy they'll be employing in order to ensure a return on the capital raising that they're going to be undertaking. So obviously, it looks quite positive. They appear to be very well positioned, and obviously it's just the funding aspect that they need. But they also need to convince investors that the funding will actually be employed, to produce a good return for the investors.
Why have investors been so fearful of, buying into the stock ahead of the rights issue? Of course, that dilutionary effect, but on the other hand, we have opportunities to get in at these low levels and take advantage of the Kenya Airways growth story as it positions itself on the continent as one of the leading airlines.
Yeah, I think the story for Kenya Airways is quite good on an overall basis. It's just that investors, see the offers likely to be quite substantial, and coming when the market conditions are the way they are, that's the main concern. But I think it's come off quite significantly, so we might, that's why we've been seeing, even some gains on the stock, because it's come off so substantially,
as you say,
ever since they announced the capital.
As you say, 30% down year to date. Let's move on to the shilling, because of course that big news and the big event this week for Kenya will be the MPC meeting tomorrow. That was unscheduled, but emergency meeting there to perhaps look at how to manage the falling currency, falling to a new record low yesterday, 95.65. Some appreciation filtering through this morning. What do you think is likely to transpire out of that meeting?
I think the most obvious one is probably that the central bank is going to raise rates, the Monetary Policy Committee. But I think also we might see some policy changes, especially impacting the banking sector. So that's where there's a little bit of uncertainty of what policy changes might be recommended. But it appears very likely that could be instituted. I guess also if you look at last week's the National Economic and Social Council, it met the advisory council to the president. They've been proposing very positive changes on the fiscal side in terms of how to support the economy to ensure that it's more export oriented, and also from a point of view of substituting some of the key imports that we are having. So in terms of fuel, trying to look at developing geothermal resources a lot more better. In terms of food, how do you develop agriculture? I think those are the right decisions going forward. I think they're going to be quite supportive in the coming weeks ahead.
Of course, you know, those are the right decisions, but those all need to be funded and need to be put into action. What do you think the game plan needs to be to start addressing issues, as you say, around reducing reliance on imports and thus reducing the vulnerability to imported inflation?
Well, I think a lot now, we're having a lot of the capacity now being built in Kenya, and also if you look at neighboring Uganda, you know, a lot of capacity being built in. The economies are sufficiently well positioned. I mean, like Uganda, they've discovered oil. I mean, there's almost very little reason that the currency should be depreciating, yet the rest of the macro is quite positive if you look at the population as well. Kenya as well, logistically very well positioned. So I think it's just a matter of funding. For the first time, we've seen the Kenya government actually requesting IMF assistance, and that decision is likely to be made in October. So that's part of it. But essentially, if you're looking at the currencies maybe 5 years back, you know, the Kenyan currency hasn't performed any worse than Ghana or the Nigerian currency. So, you know, in essence, probably it was a worthwhile adjustment. It's obviously just going to be more expensive going forward in terms of funding some of the capital expenditures for some of the major investments that are needed.